Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki. Here on Today in the News, we read and give in-depth analysis of some of the stories making waves across Nigeria. And this morning on the paper review, I will start with Vanguard. Vanguard this morning is leading with terrorism. Defense headquarters declares Bello Turji, Aliero, 17 others wanted. Offers 5 million naira reward for information leading to arrest of each terrorist. 5 million naira reward is too small. That's coming from Stan Labo. It's a good development as election approaches. That's coming from ex-DSS Director AGO4. ACF MBF welcome development. NAF kill bandits with rockets in Kaduna. Hostages escape. Destroys a terrorist camp. You can see that story on page 8 of Vanguard newspaper. And here we have a photo story showing NPAN Media Roundtable in Lagos. And of course, it includes the President, Nigerian Union of Journalists, Malam Mustafa, President, Nigerian Guild of Editors, and others at Ikeja, Lagos yesterday. Moving on page 35, we have Nigerian Air. Federal government may cede fewer top positions to Ethiopian Airlines after Vanguard reports. And on page 36, debt servicing likely to be higher by end of December. That's according to DMO Director General. Page 9, Kanu absent as court adjourns trial indefinitely. Stories above. On page 5, we have media. Owners, journalists, stakeholders agree on code of conduct, co-regulation and ombudsman. Samamuka, Oshoba, Obaigbena, Ibru, others chart way forward. On the big interview, we have how we are deploying biotech for national development. That's coming from NABDA Director General, Professor Mustafa. You can see that on page 14. And lastly, on the front page of Vanguard on page 19, we have insurance claims payments recovers. It's 174.8 billion naira. And that's all we have on the front page of Vanguard newspaper. Away from there, we move to the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian this morning is leading with 237-day medical trips. Despite Buhari's pledge to cut costs, presidential fleet racks up 64.15 billion naira. What Buhari's 237-day medical trip costs taxpayers? Landing, fuel, parking charges go up over 1.1 billion naira. Experts lament capital flight loss to medical tourism. You can see the story on page 6. On page 6 still, we have Afenifere raises the alarm over kidnapping, burning of INEC offices in Southwest. And stories above, we have court sacks Akwa Ibom APC guber candidate, others fresh primary. Lastly, on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, we have NBC imposes 2 million naira fine on Arise News for alleged breach of broadcasting code. And you can see that on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Away from there, we move to the Nation newspaper. The Nation this morning is leading with Abdul Salami panel. Rising violence threatens polls. Politicians not ready to play by the rules, says INEC. You can see that on page 4. Abiodun inaugurates a 2.35 kilometer Arepo journalist estate road. Oyebanji names advisors. You can see that on pages 27 and 28. Stories above, we have Why I Invited Buhari Obi Kwankwaso, others by BK. Lastly, on the front page of the Nation newspaper, we have 2 policemen crushed to death. You can see that on page 27 of the Nation. Away from that, we'll move to the Punch. The Punch this morning is leading with 2023 polls. Soludo attacks Obi again, says ex-governor can't win. Negotiate with Tinubu. Atiku, Soludo advises Southeast. Why I rejected Obi's offer to defect to PDP in 2017 poll, says Anambra governor. Soludo allowing himself to be used. Obi will win. That's coming from Labour Party PCC. You can see that story on page 2. On page 4, we have driver arrested for crushing Ekiti policeman to death. Tinubu's victory is certain, says Lalong as campaign begins. Stories above, we have INEC office attacks worry. UK and United States opposes rigging. Lastly, on the front page of the Punch newspaper, we have organized private sector section $9 trillion agenda for federal government. You can see that on page 29 of the Punch newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies. Join us after the break. All right, welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Today in the News on Vanguard Live. I'm Damilola Ogunshaki. Joining me to analyze the front pages of dailies this morning is Mr. Dayo Akintobi, the publisher of Ilupeju Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning, Damilola. Good morning to all our viewers.
Yes, thank you for joining us. All right, we have a very, very interesting one on the front page this morning, and that's the fact that Defense Headquarters yesterday released a list of 19 most wanted terrorist kingpin and commanders, including the Bello Turji in Aliero. And of course, they offered a 5 million naira reward for those who will provide information that will lead to their arrest. What do you think about this?
This is a good development. It shows that the federal government is finally taking this issue of banditry and terrorism very seriously. For them to have even been able to identify 19 key commanders of those who are wreaking this havoc, for them to know who the 19 are, it means that our intelligence architecture is working well. It means they have informants. It means they probably have surveillance. It means that they're probably listening in on the bugged telephones. They're listening to conversations. They're probably monitoring internet chat. And so they've identified these 19 key people who are commanders who oversee large-scale terrorism operations. And now that the political will is there to have identified these people, it means the government is now going after them full scale. Now, the fight against terrorism, because you are basically fighting an unseen enemy. It's not like conventional warfare where it's man-to-man, face-to-face combat. Terrorism, you are fighting a hidden, unseen enemy. So sometimes it's really very difficult to pinpoint who is behind it, to identify them, and to go after them. So recognizing that, the security operatives have now used a different methodology to try and apprehend these people, which is by offering a reward. Now, remember that these bandits, these terrorist commanders, they are our people. They live among us. They're in our communities. They sleep in our villages. They eat with our people. They recharge their phones. They buy petrol. They do all the normal things of daily activity because they don't live in a vacuum. It's not like they're existing strictly in the forest and they can make life, daily life continue without interacting with other human beings around them. So they are in our villages. They are being sheltered and harbored and hidden by fellow Nigerians. So the idea is to give an incentive. So far, it seems that the notion that these are dangerous people who are killing our people, maiming our people, robbing and pillaging our communities, that's not enough incentive so far for their brethren to give them up. So the government has now dangled a carrot. And money is a great motivator to anybody. Money will make some people sell their own mother. So the government has used that carrot now. The only issue for me is I think 5 million is a bit small. The notion that somebody will turn in a person, he has not felt compelled to turn in the person because the person is killing fellow Nigerians. So I think there needs to be a much stronger incentive than 5 million. 5 million doesn't do much for you in Nigeria of today. Plus, theoretically, the bandits and the terrorists have a lot more money. So if you're offering 5 million, the kingpin Bello Turji can afford to give the guy 10 million to keep him hidden or to keep him undercover. So I don't think 5 million as an incentive is enough to make anybody turn in or to make most people turn in their brethren. But it's a start. It's a good development. It shows the political will is there to apprehend these people and bring this scourge to a stop or reduce it to its barest minimum. So I think it's a good start we build from there. We might, out of the 19, see one or two of the smaller ones being turned in for 5 million. I don't think the Bello Turjis or the major kingpins among those 19, it's incentive enough for them to be turned in because those communities where they are surviving or hiding or living, they're probably doing things in those communities as well. They're probably feeding. They won't feed themselves alone and leave the villagers to starve. So they're probably feeding those people. They're probably giving them money. They're buying generators for them. They're, they're doing things. So those ones will wait and say, for 5 million to give this person up, what will I stand to lose if I give him up for 5 million? But if you've had him say 50 million or something to that extent, question is, can government afford 50 million times in 19 places?
Yes.
That's the issue. But it's a good start.
Well, Nigerians, do you think Nigerians trust the government enough to actually turn these people off? Because, of course, we've heard of corruption cases and, there are some allegations also against the military itself. Do you think with this they have enough trust in the government?
There's massive distrust in the government from ground zero anyway. And I think this government in particular, more than any other government since 1999, has got a trust deficit with the public because they've said many things that they haven't done. They've promised many things that didn't come to pass. They've said they're fighting corruption. Corruption is rife. They've, even the military has been accused of diverting funds meant for equipment. We found past military commanders owning properties overseas, having millions of naira stashed away somewhere and things like that. So in terms of the public perception, public will probably take this with a grain of salt and say, that's another one of their contraptions or one of their scams that is meant to pull the wool over the eyes of the people. But bottom line is, it's public information that there's a 5 million naira reward. It's been put out there. So there's no way somebody will turn in one of these people or give information that will lead to the arrest of one of these people and you won't pay that 5 million and there won't be a huge outcry. So even if you don't intend, or even if you're just playing fast and loose with the truth and you don't really intend to follow through, the downside, the fallout will be unimaginable if you don't keep that promise. So even if the public doesn't believe it, I would say we should take it cautiously and just kind of wait and see how it plays out. Trust is key, but the fact that they've made it public, it's not a private arrangement where they've quietly said, we'll pay this money.
I mean, we've seen some court cases where, some individuals, will sue the federal government to court and they will. And they've been awarded some money, but the federal government have refused to pay, even with this money being public.
Yes, but also that's probably because the judicial process is still ongoing. If a lower court says pay you 10 million and you appeal it, even if the appellate court says pay you 10 million, yes, the lower court was right, and you go to Supreme Court while it's still pending, because the appellate process takes years and years and years. And of course, no government is just going to sit back and accept. No defendant is going to sit back and accept a court decision that they don't agree with. So probably the government is still fighting against those decisions. But by the time the final decision comes from the Supreme Court that says pay this money, any government that doesn't pay it is seen as a rogue government. I heard a saying once, I think it was an American president, who said, the Supreme Court does not have its own army. So how does it enforce any judgment it makes? So it's up to respect for the Constitution, respect for the rule of law that makes governments conform with judicial pronouncements. Any government that does not ultimately conform with a final judicial judgment, that government is rogue. And what is our antidote, or what is our payback to that? 4 years from now, you have the right to exercise your franchise and say, you are a rogue government, you don't respect court decisions. And as a result, for that reason, we are voting you out. But guess what? From the first time of this government, they disrespected court opinions. Did that stop us from voting them back in again? So it's our fault. I mean, if we feel that they are not doing the right thing according to the way things should run, we have the ultimate power to say, you're not right, we don't like what you're doing, and we won't take it. But do we do that? So we have ourselves to blame. Yes.
All right. Placing these people unwantedly, some Nigerians are convinced that that the military does not have enough intelligence to hunt these people and arrest them. That's why they're placing them on wanted list.
It's possible because look at how long they've been looking for them. Look at how long they've been fighting this fight. As I told you, terrorism is an unseen enemy. It uses surprise attacks. It uses informants. It uses various methods that are not conventional warfare. So obviously they've tried to apprehend them through the normal methodology. I mean, they've been bombing the forests. They've been sending ground troops in. They've been doing all these things. And yes, granted, they've made some successes, and the army seems to have reduced this issue of terrorism and banditry to some extent. But it hasn't been extinguished completely. If you still have 19 terrorist commanders out there still wreaking havoc, it means the problem is still prevalent. So it's an admission by the government that our methods up to this point have not worked. Let us try something different. I think that's an honorable thing to do. You try, you fail, you try something different. So there's no issue. It's not a shameful thing to say that our military has not been capable. All over the world, terrorism is being fought differently, and it is challenging. It's not the kind of warfare we've been used to where you see an enemy, you know where the enemy is, and you face each other in combat. So even America and all these other countries, they also have problems fighting terrorism. So it's not unique to Nigeria alone that the army has not been able to grapple with this thing and wrestle it into submission. It is because it's a new form of warfare that everybody around the world is adapting to newly. So it's a good thing that they've now admitted the fact that let us use extraordinary measures. We're appealing to that human instinct of greed to say, turn in your fellow man for a mess of porridge. That has worked from time immemorial. People are motivated by money, and as a result, the government is saying, let's try that tactic and see if that works better than the way we've been doing it up to now.
All right. Nigerian Air Force recently bombarded terrorist locations. They killed them with rockets in Kaduna, and some of the hostages, they escaped. But some of the issues that Nigerians are having is that they're asking questions, should this information be allowed to go out? I mean, the methods they're using to get these terrorists, should it be allowed to go out?
Well, there's something about propaganda and about public dissemination of information. The military commanders usually weigh the kind of information they release. I know that based on national security, not very much is known to the public about how things operate. So from what you're saying, you're asking this bombing that occurred, that the army bombed the forests and some hostages were able to escape, should this have been kept from the public? Because I think where you're going with this is that you think by letting the terrorists know the tactics, they can prevent or defend against it in the future. Yes. Right. I think there's a balance between a need to know to the public, because part of informing the public is also to give public reassurance that we're on top of this situation. We've bombed this forest. We've killed a number of them. Some of the hostages were able to escape. So Nigerians, keep your mind at rest that your government is working for you. Your government is working hard to defend you. The value of that sometimes supersedes whatever the terrorists may be able to gain from that information. Also remember, military strategy and tactics is not what they did yesterday that they will do today, that they will do tomorrow. Because they bombed the forest in that particular manner yesterday doesn't mean that's the way they will approach an attack today or tomorrow. So I don't think that revealing that in any way empowers or strengthens the terrorists, because they didn't release specific strategy. They didn't release specific locations, specific times, specific troop movements. They don't release those kind of things. This is general enough information to reassure the public, to update the public, and I don't think there's anything in that information that the terrorists can use to their advantage.
All right, let's move on. The detained leader of IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, protested his planned rearrangement on a fresh 7-count terrorism charge the federal government preferred against him. And right now, the court now has been adjourned till indefinitely. Now, what do you think about this whole Nnamdi Kanu's court issue? The fact that courts told them to release him, and the federal government has failed to follow the court orders.
Remember what we mentioned earlier about rogue government not respecting court orders. I know that there's a subsisting court order that quashed the case against Nnamdi Kanu and said, set him free. the government looked at it and said, we're not setting him free because we've appealed that order, and while that appeal is pending, we're going to keep him. Now, it seems like they've now come to the conclusion that they can't win the appeal and that eventually he'll be let go. So they've now come with a legal strategy of coming up with new charges to rearraign him so that they still keep him and they still try him. What's the legality of that? I'm not a lawyer, but from what I read, when the charges were quashed, it was said that they cannot retry him on the same charges again. So I don't know what the Attorney General is up to. I don't know what the presidency is up to. I don't know what the judiciary is up to. Because you can see that notion of, oh, he didn't come to court, so we are postponing the trial indefinitely. Indefinitely can mean 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, he'll just be there. I mean, no court date again until whenever they decide whatever the issues are. In other words, it means that they were annoyed that he did refuse to come to court. And they've taken revenge on him, basically. Okay, you don't come to court, we'll deal with you. So go and stay there for however long until you come to your senses. So that's a violation of every kind of human right, every kind of civil right. First of all, judicial pronouncements are not based on personal sentiment. You look at the law down the road. So you postpone indefinitely because, first of all, his lawyer even said that it's a curious development because Nnamdi Kanu has always wanted to be present at all of his judicial hearings, that he's not one to stay away from court. So it's already curious as it is that he wasn't brought to court yesterday. So he can't explain it, he doesn't understand it, because the Nnamdi Kanu that he knows will always attend every court hearing. Maybe Kanu is protesting against the fact that they want to rearraign him on charges that have been quashed by another court. It goes to show you the power of government, whether proper or improperly deployed. The government has the power to do and undo. Otherwise, where can it be that a court has said set you free and they look for a legal loophole by which to continue to hold you? So that's why we should be careful about those we entrust with political power. Let's be very careful about despots, about autocrats, about dictators sneaking into power under the guise of being Democrats and wearing agbada instead of military dictator uniforms. Because when things like this happen, it makes you begin to question and say, what really is democracy if your rights are not guaranteed and protected by the Constitution? If any government, because it has power, because government has power, government has army, they have police, they have coercive apparatus of force to compel you to do or not to do. They can hold you by force, even in spite of judicial pronouncement. The judge, Supreme Court, any court doesn't have its own army. So that's why we should give power to those who are responsible with power, not those who will abuse power. So we have to be very careful. At the end of the day, I always still keep preaching this same mantra that it all boils down to the citizens, to make sure that those you entrust with power are not those who will abuse it, they're not those who will overuse it, they're not those who will be corrupt, they're not those who will be nepotistic, they're not those who will favor their own kind, they won't be ethnic jingoists, they won't be religionists. You have to be very careful. So 2023 is another opportunity, which is why we should pay attention to all the candidates now and listen to what they're saying very carefully so we can know those who will be responsible with power if entrusted to them.
What message is this sending to IPOB members?
Well, of course, IPOB members will be highly discouraged by this because Nnamdi Kanu is a symbol of their struggle. He's their leader. They've always been agitating for his release. They've always felt that he's been unfairly persecuted, that the United Nations Charter of Human Rights allows for agitation for secession, and that's all they're doing. They're simply saying they no longer want to be a part of Nigeria and they want their own independent republic, and that the UN Charter guarantees them the right to agitate for that. And so they are not criminal in intent, that their intent is not criminal, that they're just fighting for their rights. And Nnamdi Kanu is the touchstone. He is the arrowhead of that struggle. And as a result, simply because he's agitating for their right for self-determination, the government is repressing him or they're persecuting him. So their own struggle for Nnamdi Kanu's release is part of the larger struggle for the self-determination of the people of Biafra. And as a result, any and everything that's done to Nnamdi Kanu that is deemed to be unfair or unjust raises the ire of these people to the point that they begin to exhibit tendencies of violence, tendencies of protest, tendencies of mayhem, because they believe an injustice is being done to them by the injustice being done to their leader. So I won't doubt, in as much as I would appeal to them to maintain calm and try to use judicial means to fight for his rights. I mean, his lawyer, Michael Zeko Mensan, is very capable, very competent to fight the legal fight. He will go toe-to-toe with Malami, the Attorney General of the Federation. And the better man will prevail. But I don't doubt his credentials to fight a good legal fight. So I would just appeal to IPOB members to rely more on the judicial protest. It doesn't mean on the judicial process. It doesn't mean they can't protest. They can protest peacefully. They can carry placard and go to court on the day of his court appearance. They can do rallies in his support. They can write letters to their congressmen, to their House of Assembly members, their senators. There are things they can do that are what they call non-confrontational agitation, non-violent agitation that they can do, because each time there's an act of violence in the Southeast, it strengthens the resolve of the federal government to believe that these are terrorists, these are unknown gunmen, these are no good, and it makes the government use a more militaristic approach as opposed to a political approach or a judicial approach. The more IPOB members agitate violently, the more the government is going to press down on them and seek to quell their agitation, which now detracts from the main issue of the fact that this is a political problem. We can't solve we shouldn't seek to solve a political problem through violence. We should seek to solve a political problem through political and judicial means.
All right, let's look at this one quickly. Critical stakeholders in the media industry yesterday agreed on a 41-point code of ethics for Nigerian journalists. They adopted a co-regulation instead of a self-regulation mechanism. Can you tell us what this means as a media person yourself?
Yes, essentially, the media all along has been policing itself in terms of standards, in terms of let's make sure the accuracy of what we're publishing, let's make sure we're not promoting hate speech, let's not publish any libelous or defamatory material, let's not allow profane language, abusive language, those kind of things. So their judicial ethics, let's not allow money to skew our objectivity, that brown envelope syndrome of journalists. Let's not allow it to interfere with the objectivity of our reporting. Now, up to this point, essentially it's been up to each individual media house to police itself. That's what we mean by self-regulation. But now what they've come up with is that this idea of co-regulation. All the major journalism bodies, Nigerian Guild of Editors, Nigerian Union of Journalists, Broadcasting Organization of Nigerian Newspaper Proprietors Association, all the umbrella bodies that cover media practitioners in Nigeria have all come together and said, what we should do, because standards are falling, the internet having made everybody now a broadcaster or a journalist, has really watered down the ethics of journalism to where any and everybody is doing what they like. We saw the sample where Arise TV had to apologize to the APC presidential candidate just yesterday or the day before for a piece of fake news about Tinubu that accidentally or inadvertently was broadcast on Arise TV. They had to apologize. So in this situation of co-regulation, we are each other's brother's keeper, is what they're trying to say. Let us police each other and make sure that we adhere to the strictest standards of journalism. And the reason for that is because social media, digital broadcasting, the internet has brought in all comers into this thing to where you can no longer distinguish or differentiate between professional practitioners and casual broadcasters or casual publishers. And the casual, non-professional publishers, they are muddying the waters because they are putting out content that's not regulated, content that's not subjected to the ethics of the profession. So what it is doing is that it's maligning all of us. It's making the entire industry look bad. So what the elders of the profession seek to do is to create a distinction between the professional journalist and the hobbyist who's just playing around on social media, so that you can differentiate and know, no, this is Vanguard. That anything put out by Vanguard, you can take it to the bank as credible. You know it is of the highest ethical journalistic standards. There's no question about its credibility, its originality, its accuracy, as opposed to something that you just pick up on Facebook or is shared on WhatsApp and you don't know the provenance or the origin, and you can separate that and say, well, I can't rely on that because it's coming from citizen journalists. So that's the aim, is to reinforce the standards of professional journalism and create a distinction between the professional and the civilian journalist. So to do that, all of the umbrella media organizations will come together and regulate each other. By that, they will hold each other accountable to the ethics of the profession.
All right, thank you. Let's just look at this, Mr. and Mrs. And the first person speaking today is Mrs. She says, come on, dear, do this. Do this. I need the money urgently. Remember, you are the sunshine of my life. And Mr. replied, I know, but there's a global climate change now.
He's trying to escape, trying to pay the money. Yes, there's global climate change and there's rain and there's clouds, but still, even in a cloudy day, he can still be the sunshine of our life.
Thank you, Mr. Dayo, for joining us this morning.
Pleasure's all mine.
And of course, Mr. Dayo Akintobi is the publisher of Ilukpeji Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. He just reviewed and analyzed some of the stories on the front pages with us this morning. Now, to get more of our top stories, you can follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, our WhatsApp number is also displayed on your screen. It's bye from me, Damlola Ukoshaki.